Easter. It's way too dull here. So I'm going to say, He is risen. What are you all going to say? No? He is risen indeed. Alright? Okay, let's try that. He is risen.
He is indeed.
Alright, little, I mean, it's getting there. We're getting there. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Amen. Alright, every time I find someone dozing off or sleeping a little bit, I'll say that and get us back up, right? Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to just welcome you, everyone here. Just for you all taking the time on this great day to come and join us here at Long Island Worship Center. You cannot imagine what a great privilege it is for us, for you to come here and worship with us this morning. As we've been singing songs and worshiping, perhaps some of you have wondered, what's this big deal? Why are these Christians like closing their eyes and getting all... And we kept singing about being happy, Why are we so happy about this great deal? What is so big about Easter? Sure, Jesus rose from the dead. And sure, there's a Easter bunny and a few Easter egg hunts going on. But is this really that big a deal? That, we're all chirpy and, upbeat on this early Sunday morning? My goal today, in the next few minutes, is to explain what the big deal is all about. Why we care and we are so upbeat and really enjoy this day called Easter as we celebrate. And it's celebrated by billions of people all across the world in different corners, different languages, different people groups celebrating this very day together. So, as we were singing this morning, and that song that Jeff just sang, where it goes, there in the ground, his body lay, light of the world by darkness slain. The story could have just ended there. The story could have ended on Friday, where, all seemed to be lost. The disciples of Jesus, back in the day, almost had given up hope on that Friday, when all was lost and darkness seemed to have won out. But the great news is what? That comes on the Sunday, on this very day, where 3 days later, Jesus rose from the dead. And as we sang, then bursting forth on that glorious day, up from the grave he rose again. I would like to actually propose today that Easter is just not a religious holiday or just another day the Christians came up with to compete with the other religions or to have our say in this world of, holidays. It's actually the climax of the greatest love story that was ever written or ever told in the history of humanity. And I'll make my points today to kind of show how God the Father went out of his way to make this point, make this invitation to all of humanity. Human love stories normally involve, as depicted in Hollywood, and if you watch Hindi movies, Bollywood, or if you're into the fairy tale of Cinderella and so forth, it always is about this two-way relationship, isn't it? It's about the guy and the girl, and how one falls for the other first, and eventually there's a mutual kind of understanding, and they're head over heels for each other, and they live happily ever after. Right? That's what human love stories are all about. It's really about this two-way street, right? Relationships that go both ways. It's the man and the woman, or father and son. I mean, whatever the relationship is, it's two-way. It's like both parties are involved. You would hardly ever see a love story being written where it's just one person doing all the work and the other just, running away. That doesn't make for a great love story, does it? But the greatest love story that has ever been told or written, and not just a story, but a reality, involves God the Father, as we know him, constantly pursuing his bride, his people, and his people just constantly running away. Just a very one-way street story. Very different from the stories that we hear and speak about, as I said, we see in our media. But this is the story that what excites us this morning. This is the story that all the singing and rejoicing is all about. It's a story where one person relentlessly pursuing his lover or his children, and eventually the children coming on back to them. So this whole sort of story, as I said, started off in this Garden of Eden, where the first sort of Adam and Eve, the first creation, started their human life. That's where God, we see God's intention for how He wanted to deal with humanity kind of exists. A lot of times we have these ideas about God and religion, and just this notion of this big, white-bearded guy who's just looking for people to trip up and do something wrong, and he's just going to smite them up. But the Garden of Eden sort of shows the original intent of what God actually wanted. The Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 3 that God walked with Adam and Eve. He literally walked in the garden with them. That's the kind of relationship He wanted to have. Like a bunch of friends just strolling down on a nice, summer evening. That's what His intention was. Just to understand what life is, what's going on in their life. What they did this morning, what kind of their issues are, and how to perhaps even resolve them. But that sort of intimacy was really the original design. It wasn't this sort of dictator ruling over, his people, and once in a while taking sort of hearings. It's a skewed idea of God, because his real heart is for intimacy, and intimacy in the sense of one-on-one relationship with each and every one of His children. It started from Adam and Eve, back in our great-grandfather and great-grandmother, and continues to this day. That is still His intent. And I just want to, kind of make that point very clear, because that if you have a misunderstanding or an idea about God that exists outside that, the story is hard to get. It's so hard to follow the story, because you have to understand the heart of the God who was actually pursuing it. But things didn't end up too well in the garden. They had some good times where they had some fellowship with the Lord, but eventually man wanted to take over. Because we're so want to be in control of our situation. And Adam and Eve, our great-grandmother and great-grandfather, were no different. They wanted to take things in their own hands, right? They wanted to figure out, not just be people who are just following rules from someone else, but rather figure out themselves. After all, it's their life, right? It's their way of doing things. And they just wanted to know, what has God got to tell me to do things, and not to eat from this, and not to do this, and not to do that. They forgot that He was the Creator, not just a buddy. He was a friend, and He walked with them, but He also knew them better than they knew themselves, and therefore knew their strengths, their weaknesses, and the way they would thrive in society. And the moment Adam and Eve decided that, we're going to take things in our own hands, we're going to go take that fruit and partake from it. What actually happened was they were rebelling against God. They were saying to God, you know what? You have done all these things for us, but we want to do things our way. And actually that hurt God a lot, and really broke that great intimacy that He shared with humans. The Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 3, verses 3. He said, God did say, you must not eat from the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden. You must not touch it, or you will die. Romans chapter 6, verse 23 also says, the wages of sin is death. The punishment for breaking the trust of God and the intimacy that God had set up with humanity was death. So you might ask, how come Adam and Eve just didn't die right away? Shouldn't that have been the end result? They had betrayed the trust of their Creator. They had betrayed the trust of the greatest force in the universe. shouldn't the story have ended right there? And that's why I wanted to phrase this whole speech or sermon this morning about the great love of God. Because if it wasn't for the love of God, the story would have ended right there. Because that's what He even promised to them. The day you eat or break my commandment, you will die. It was as simple as that. But He didn't do it. He didn't do it because He was also a loving God. A God that is just unconditionally more love than you could possibly imagine from the most loving person on this earth. I mean, what else is there? What other way is there to put it? God's unconditional love is it's just looking for second chances. And that day in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve had decided to walk away, God was looking for a second chance right there. He wanted to give His loving kids another chance. But you know what? God is also a just God. So He's not a God that just can close His eyes and say, I'm going to just assume that none of this happened. Because the just King, we talk about justice and truth. Those are the qualities where things are done in a fair manner, aren't they? When we think about a great ruler, we think about Him being just to His people. So for the justice to be done to the word which required the suit to die right there, he had to find a way. He had to find a way that required Him to be a just God, at the same time be a loving God. It's this conundrum that He carried, right, within His heart. How can He at the same time save the very people that He loved the most in the creation? These two that really represents all of us, because we all came from them. But at the same time, do what was required for the sin that had entered the world through their actions. Take away the work that had done by human beings, and at the same time, continue to preserve them. From that moment onwards, the book that we call the Bible here is really a story of God continuously pursuing His people through the ages. He did that through the nation of Israel for many years, what we call the Old Testament, and He continues to do that in the New Testament as well, which is the books that came after Christ. But really, the recurring theme continues to be this one thing. A God that is loving and is so wants to build a relationship with His people. He's just continuing to pursue them day in, day out, trying to find a way to bring back them to the Garden of Eden. Through that relationship where we literally walk with Him and talk with Him and really understand that. There's a book called Redeeming Love, and it's inspired there by the book of Hosea in the Bible. It's a story of a young girl who finds her way, finds a wrong company and ends up being a prostitute. And, she obviously gives her body up to so many men that she almost loses all sort of emotion and love and just the understanding of intimacy that we think about it in a romantic relationship. And here comes a guy in the story, and he falls in love with this woman who is a prostitute. And they end up getting married. At first she thinks it's a great deal. Someone, every girl's dream to get married. And eventually the life that she has lived takes over. She continues to find herself running away with other men. Just continuing to go back to the life that she had lived for so many years. What do you think the response of the guy was? When looking at all that she had done, he forgave her and tried to make her his wife, and then she runs away again. And the story, it goes on and on, how multiple times she runs away, and he continues to pursue her over and over and over. The redeeming love that he showed in this story depicts really what God has for His people. You know what? We just are, just so prone, so easily seduced away. It's not about people who attend the church or people who are religious have it all figured out. At this church, we do not claim that. It continues to be a struggle for every single one of us, including me, to continue to build that relationship. I know He has redeemed me. I know He has brought me in. I know He loves me. And yet, my natural instincts is like that prostitute. Just wants to run away. Just wants to get seduced by the world. But you know what? As I mentioned, at that moment where God had seen Adam and Eve, sin against Him or go against Him, He had to figure a way out. He Himself had to come up with a way that would resolve this situation. Remember I said how He, being a just God, had to keep His word to punish by death the sin that was made. And at the same time, He, being a loving God, could not let His people die. And the solution He came up was Jesus Christ. As we sang this morning, till on that cross that Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. For every sin on Him we lay. Here in the love of Christ I stand. The love of God was manifested no greater way than Jesus Christ. In the Old Testament and the New Testament, we continue to see, as I mentioned, this pursuit of God, continuing to go after His people. But the ultimate way He decided to do that was through Jesus Christ. When God Himself decided, as being the Creator, being the one who spoke universe into existence, He decided it was time for Him to become man Himself, to be able to redeem His people. God's great gift to humanity, what we call an eternal jailbreak, was this chance to start back to the road towards Eden. Where it all went wrong, Christ stands and invites each one of us, no matter what your language, what your race, what your background, what your education, what your intellectual understanding of this world, what your understanding of science and technology, you name it. End of the day, it's just a personal relationship that God wants to build with each and every one of us. That's what He did for me. As Jeff said earlier, we sometimes wonder, had He not got us at the right time in our lives, I just wonder where I would have been. I wonder the choices I was starting to make as a teenager, where those would have led me, where those would have ended up being. The redeeming love of Jesus Christ is the only thing that is worth talking about in Easter. And as I started off saying, what is the big deal about Easter? Why are we so thrilled and just, so joyful about it? It's because we were not condemned to the punishment that we deserve. The wages of sin were death. Meaning what we deserved was death. The choices I made deserved death because it did not match up to the standards that the Creator had set. But the redemption is Jesus Christ, and that He took our place. He said to God, here is a perfect, sinless creature that has ever existed in the history of humanity. And this creature, this particular representative for us, will take the sin, will take all our blame and die on the cross. That's why we are so thrilled about something as gruesome as the cross. You wonder why Christianity is always depicted in the cross and this death. Isn't that something sad and something kind of gory? I'm sure many of you watched The Passion of the Christ, the movie that came out a few years ago. It's not something to be celebrated or something to be thrilled about, someone dying on the cross. But the reason we as Christians, we who believe in Jesus Christ, are really so thankful for what happened on the cross is because at that very moment when He was dying, He was substituting for me on the cross. And not just me or the people who believe in Christianity or believe in Jesus, but for every single person who has ever walked on the face of this earth and who will ever walk. Jesus Christ stands in the middle of history and calls all those who just simply accept Him as their Lord and Savior. And what that really means is saying that, God, I have got it wrong. I do not match up to your standards. But thank you for sending Jesus as that ultimate sacrifice on my behalf. Thank you for creating this way when all that was left was death for me. Easter is not just a celebration of this great victory that Christ has won. We are thrilled about it. We're so thankful for what He did on the cross. But like I started off earlier, the story doesn't end on Friday. There is a Sunday. Amen?
Amen.
The one who was buried and where darkness had seemingly won victory. On Sunday morning, Jesus decided to rise up from the dead. You know, why is that so important to us? Why is that such a big deal that Jesus had to raise up from the dead? Because He, being a representative for me and you, He also carries with Him that hope. That one day, even though in this so-called world, my human body might die, I might walk out, get into my car, and get into a car accident and die on the spot. Or I might end up living 80 years of my life and then die. But no matter what the situation, the story doesn't end for me. I'm not just an entity that is just going to get back into this earth and become, manure for the trees and plants. There is something that is eternal about me. There's something eternal about you. And that eternal aspect of you is preserved in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. When He raised up from the dead, what He is promising anybody, no matter who you are, who decides to follow Him, is that one day that we will also rise up and be made one with Him. Remember I talked about the Garden of Eden where there was perfection. That perfection will be renewed in every which way of how God had intended this to be. So, this is not a day to be gloomy or to be, sad about. It's not a day to be, in sort of reflection about, because the story did not just end with the death. There was something that was so powerful and so extraordinary that a person was risen up from the dead, where death was supposed to be the end of humanity. It really isn't. I mean, you get these few years on this earth, and then death seeds it all, right? Our legacy tends to end when we die. Our parents and our grandparents who have gone before us, who may not be in this world anymore, it seems that death sort of seals their story right there. But what Jesus offers each and every single one of us is a legacy that does not end right at that moment where we die or we are buried. A legacy that is eternal in every sense of the word. Return to the Garden of Eden, the restoration of the relationship that God had intended, the original intent of God is still preserved through the sacrifice of Jesus. But all that takes, me, you, or anybody, is to just come before God and just say these simple words of, God, I had got it wrong. I had not matched up to your standards. But thank you for Jesus Christ. Thank you for this great redeeming story. Thank you for coming after the prostitute like me. Thank you for the one who overlooks all my trespasses, all my sins, all my wrongdoings, every guilt that we carry. Sometimes the wrong things we have done perhaps, make us think that, why would a loving God, a perfect God, even care to come after me? Why would, like in the story I mentioned, that guy, why would he keep coming after the prostitute that was his wife? It's that love that he shares for each and every one of us. And as we sang, earlier this morning, the words go, no guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. From life's first cry to final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. There are several factors in this world that we as humans are trying to work our way up. New York, as I always say, exemplifies the attitude of human beings trying to make it up the ladder on their own every single day. I work in Manhattan, and every single day when I am with my colleagues and friends, it's just this ongoing struggle to create a legacy, to be in control of our own destiny, and to make a name so that when we are gone, people will remember us. But Christ offers something much more easier, much more light. He said, the Word of God says, His yoke is light. It's because He offers us eternal destiny, eternal legacy. All we have to say is, Christ, I'm in your team. I accept that sacrifice you made on my behalf so I can become one with the Father again. I can walk with God and ask Him all the great questions that are in my mind, like where did the dinosaurs go, or whatever else you wanted to ask God. That eternal legacy is not reserved for any people group or any religious group or any sect or faith group. It's an open invitation for every human being that has ever lived, and more importantly, for those who are here this morning. I want to lead you all in a prayer this morning. And if you felt at any point of time this morning that, your life perhaps has gone the way that wasn't supposed to be. Perhaps you have not been living to the standards of what God had intended. The purity that God had intended in His relationship with us. The one-on-one intimacy that He demands from us. That He created us to be in. But, perhaps things have gone wrong, just like it did for our forefathers a few thousand years ago. But God is inviting you this morning to just come before Him and just allow Jesus Christ, as we as Christians say, our Savior. What we really mean is Jesus Christ stands before God as an advocate on our behalf. All He says is, these people that you want to kill, that you want to punish and damn forever, are with me. They're in my team. But that requires me and you to just say these simple words that, God, you are the one